You're at the grocery store checkout when your child decides that now is the perfect time to demonstrate their Olympic-level tantrum skills because you won't buy the candy strategically placed at their eye level. Your face burns hot, the cashier gives that look, and somewhere deep in your ancestral brain, a voice whispers, "I wonder if the wolves would take this one back." Neuroscience tells us something fascinating about these moments. When your child pushes your buttons, you have exactly 90 seconds before your brain becomes chemically hijacked. 90 seconds that determine whether you'll respond with the wisdom of a parenting guru or the restraint of a toddler yourself. What if I told you that staying calm has nothing to do with what your child is doing? The goal is not to never feel triggered by your child's behavior. That's impossible. The real transformation happens not when you eliminate triggers, but when you master what happens in those critical 90 seconds after being triggered. This is what separates reactive parents from responsive ones, and it's something you can learn regardless of your child's age or temperament. Today, you'll discover 5 specific techniques that fit perfectly within this 90-second window. These are not vague suggestions to just breathe or stay positive. These are precise psychological tools, drawing from Dr. Dan Siegel's interpersonal neurobiology and Dr. Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory that can transform those triggering moments when staying calm seems nearly impossible. And no, these are not techniques that require monk-like patience or hours of practice. Parents who've applied these methods report feeling in control even during their child's most challenging moments. They're designed specifically for real parents in real moments of stress, including one technique so counterintuitive that it seems like it could not possibly work until you try it. Before we dive in, think about your most recent "I'm about to lose it" moment with your child. Was it the breakfast battle? The bedtime rebellion? The homework meltdown? Whatever it was, imagine having handled it with calm confidence instead of frustration. That's not just possible. It's predictable once you understand what's happening in your brain and body during those critical 90 seconds. Unlike most parenting videos that focus on changing your child's behavior, these techniques focus exclusively on your response, because that's the only part you can actually control in the moment. Let's start with understanding exactly what happens in your nervous system during those 90 seconds, and why this window is your golden opportunity for emotional mastery. What if I told you that emotions, in their purest form, last only 90 seconds in your body? This is not my opinion, it's neuroscience, specifically the groundbreaking research of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. When your child pushes your buttons, perhaps refusing to put on shoes for the 5th time when you're already late, a chemical cascade begins in your brain. Stress hormones flood your system, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow. But here's the revelation that changed everything for me. This chemical surge processes through your body in just 90 seconds, unless you keep it alive with your thoughts. After those 90 seconds, if you continue to fuel the circuit with thoughts like, "Why does she always do this?" or "He knows this drives me crazy," you're essentially choosing to extend your stress response. What could have been a minute and a half of discomfort becomes hours of emotional turmoil. This is not about suppressing your emotions. It's about understanding their natural life cycle and not artificially extending them. As Dr. Dan Siegel reminds us, where attention goes, neural firing flows, and neural connection grows. Your focus literally reshapes your brain's response patterns. Remember this fundamental truth. You cannot parent effectively while dysregulated. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational planning part of your brain, goes offline when you're flooded with stress chemicals. This is why you say things you later regret or make threats you cannot follow through on. The 5 techniques I'm about to share all work within this critical 90-second window to interrupt the stress cycle before it hijacks your parenting. Let's begin with the most powerful physiological intervention in your parental toolkit. The first technique is what neuroscientists call the vagal brake, a physiological intervention that directly activates your parasympathetic nervous system to interrupt the stress response at its source. Your vagus nerve is the superhighway connecting your brain to your body. When activated, it literally puts the brakes on your fight or flight response. This is not metaphorical, it's biological. Here's exactly how to apply this technique in those critical 90 seconds. First, place one hand on your heart and one on your stomach. This physical touch sends safety signals to your nervous system. Next, breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, filling your lower lungs so your stomach expands. Hold that breath for 7 seconds. This is crucial as it increases the carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, which triggers the parasympathetic response. Finally, exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 seconds, making a slight whooshing sound. This extended exhale is the key to activating your vagal brake. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This breathing pattern feels awkward at first. You're right. The vagal brake is like learning to ride a bike, initially uncomfortable but eventually automatic. Start practicing this technique during calm moments first. Try it for 30 seconds while waiting for your coffee to brew or sitting at a red light. This creates muscle memory, so when you're in that triggering moment with your child, your body already knows what to do. Remember, you don't need to master it perfectly. Even an abbreviated version with 3 deep breaths can activate your vagal response. What makes this technique so powerful is that you can use it anywhere, in the grocery store during a tantrum, at the dinner table during a food refusal, or in the car during sibling warfare. No one even needs to know you're doing it. As Dr. Stephen Porges explains in his polyvagal theory, this breathing pattern sends immediate safety signals to your brain, telling it, you are not in danger. You do not need to fight or flee. Within 60-90 seconds of applying this technique, you'll notice your heart rate slowing, your shoulders dropping, and most importantly, your thinking brain coming back online. One mother, Melissa, used this technique during her 4-year-old's epic meltdown at a family gathering. She said, "For the first time, I did not match his energy. I stayed calm, and miraculously, his tantrum lost steam much faster than usual." But what if breathing techniques are not enough? What if your child's behavior has pushed you beyond simple physiological interventions? That's where our second technique comes in, a powerful cognitive reframe that can transform your emotional response in seconds. The second technique is what we call the curious observer stance, a cognitive reframe that shifts you from reactive to responsive in seconds. When your child is pushing your buttons, your default interpretation is often personal. Why is my child doing this to me? This perspective immediately puts you in an adversarial position, triggering defensive responses. The curious observer stance flips this narrative with one simple question: what is my child trying to communicate through this behavior? Here's how to apply this technique within your 90-second window. First, notice your emotional reaction. I'm feeling frustrated. Then, physically take a half step back to create literal space between you and the situation. Finally, ask yourself, I wonder what need they're expressing right now, or what might be happening for them beneath this behavior. This is not about excusing the behavior, it's about understanding it. As Dr. Ross Greene reminds us, kids do well when they can. Behind every challenging behavior is an unmet need or an undeveloped skill. Let me show you how this works in a real scenario. Imagine your child refuses to leave the playground despite multiple warnings. Your initial thought might be, they're deliberately defying me to make me late. With the curious observer stance, you might consider, I wonder if they're having trouble with transitions today. Or, perhaps they need more sense of control in this moment. This shift from judgment to curiosity creates space for more effective responses. As one father said, when I stopped seeing my son's behavior as a personal attack and started seeing it as communication, everything changed, including how I felt in those moments. The success indicator for this technique is an internal shift from frustration to curiosity. You'll feel it, a lightness replacing the heaviness, options appearing where there seemed to be none. But what if you're so emotionally flooded that even curiosity feels impossible? That's when our third technique becomes essential, a powerful grounding method that pulls you back into the present moment. The third technique is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method, a micro-mindfulness practice that pulls you out of emotional flooding and into the present moment. When you're triggered, your attention narrows. Psychologists call this amygdala hijack. You literally lose perspective. This technique counters that narrowing by deliberately expanding your awareness through your 5 senses. Here's how to apply this technique within your 90-second window. First, identify 5 things you can see. Look around and name them specifically. I see the red chair, the blue toy, the window, the picture frame, the lamp. Next, notice 4 things you can touch or feel. I feel my feet on the floor, the fabric of my shirt, the watch on my wrist, the air on my skin. Then, identify 3 things you can hear. I hear the refrigerator humming, cars outside, my child's voice. Next, notice 2 things you can smell. I smell the coffee brewing, the laundry detergent on my clothes. Finally, identify 1 thing you can taste. I taste the mint from my tea. This technique works because it activates your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, by requiring focused attention. It literally pulls you out of emotional reactivity and into cognitive processing. Imagine you're at the grocery store and your child is having a complete meltdown in the cereal aisle. As you feel your embarrassment and frustration rising, you begin, 5 things I see: the cereal boxes, the shopping cart, my child's red shoes, the floor tiles, the store sign. By the time you reach the end of this sequence, your brain has shifted from emotional flooding to present awareness. As neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Siegel explains, where attention goes, neural firing flows. You've literally redirected your neural activity. The success indicator for this technique is expanded awareness. Your tunnel vision will widen and you'll regain perspective within those crucial 90 seconds. As one mother shared, I was about to lose it when my twins were fighting over the iPad for the 100th time. I used the 5-4-3-2-1 method, and by the end I could actually see solutions that were not visible to me before. But what if you need more than internal regulation? What if you need to physically remove yourself from the situation? That's where our 4th technique becomes invaluable. The 4th technique is what we call the weather report, a strategic disengagement approach that gives you ethical permission to create space when you need it most. One of the most challenging aspects of parenting is feeling like you must respond immediately to every situation. This technique challenges that assumption by modeling healthy emotional boundaries. Here's how to apply this technique within your 90-second window. First, notice your emotional state and name it using weather terminology. I'm feeling stormy inside, or there's a hurricane brewing in me right now. Next, communicate this briefly to your child. I'm feeling stormy inside right now. I need 90 seconds to calm down so I can help you better. Then, physically step away to a visible but separate space. This might mean moving to the other side of the room or simply sitting down if you were standing. Finally, use one of the previous techniques to regulate before re-engaging. This is not abandonment. It's modeling healthy emotional regulation. By naming your emotional state and taking responsibility for managing it, you're teaching your child one of life's most valuable skills. Many parents worry this approach undermines their authority. The opposite is true. As Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson explain in their research, when we model repair after emotional dysregulation, we actually strengthen our connection with our children. Imagine you're helping with homework, and your child's resistance has pushed you to the edge. Instead of responding with frustration, you say, I notice I'm feeling like a thunderstorm inside. I need 90 seconds to calm down so I can be helpful again. Then step away briefly. The success indicator for this technique is twofold. You prevent escalation, and you model emotional awareness. As one father said, the first time I used the weather report, my daughter was shocked. The second time, she seemed relieved. By the third time, she started using weather words to describe her own feelings. But what about preventing these situations altogether? That's where our 5th and final technique comes in, a powerful preventative approach that prepares your brain to respond differently to triggers. The fifth technique is the if-then plan, a preventative approach that prepares your brain to respond differently to predictable triggers. Most parenting advice focuses on in-the-moment strategies, but what if you could pre-program your response to triggers before they happen? This is the power of implementation intentions, what psychologists call if-then planning. Here's how to create your if-then plan. First, identify your most common trigger situations, the predictable moments when your child pushes your buttons. Maybe it's morning routines, bedtime resistance, or sibling conflicts. Next, create a specific formula. If specific trigger happens, then I will specific calming response. For example, if my child refuses bedtime, then I will take 3 deep breaths before responding. Or, if my children start fighting in the car, then I will turn on our special calm down song. The key is being extremely specific about both the trigger and your planned response. This technique works because it bypasses the need for in-the-moment decision-making. As Dr. Peter Gollwitzer's research shows, when we pre-commit to specific responses, we're up to 3 times more likely to follow through compared to general intentions. What makes this approach so powerful is that it acknowledges the reality of triggers while creating neural pathways for new responses. You're literally rewiring your brain's automatic reactions. Consider this. Harvard psychologist Ellen Langer found that decision fatigue significantly impacts our ability to respond thoughtfully. By creating if-then plans, you eliminate the need to decide how to respond when you're already triggered. One mother created this if-then plan. If my daughter has a meltdown in public, then I will whisper instead of raising my voice. She reported that this simple pre-commitment completely transformed these previously dreaded public moments. The success indicator for this technique is responding according to your values rather than your triggers. You'll notice yourself automatically implementing your planned response without the internal struggle that usually accompanies triggering moments. What's fascinating about if-then planning is that it becomes more effective with practice. Each time you successfully implement your plan, you strengthen the neural pathway, making it more automatic for the next time. Now, you might be wondering how these techniques apply to children of different ages. Let's quickly adapt these approaches for your specific parenting stage. For parents of toddlers, ages 1 to 3, your little ones are still developing emotional language, so the weather report becomes especially powerful when simplified with visual aids. Try using actual weather pictures on your phone or refrigerator. Mommy feels stormy right now, while pointing to a storm cloud. Toddlers also respond strongly to your physiological state, making the vagal brake particularly effective as they co-regulate with your calmer breathing. For parents of elementary-aged children, ages 4 to 9, this age group benefits tremendously from the curious observer stance because they're developing their narrative skills. When you model curiosity about their behavior, I wonder what made sharing so difficult today. You're teaching them to reflect on their own emotions. The if-then plan works beautifully with this age group when co-created. What should we both do next time we feel frustrated during homework? For parents of tweens and teens, ages 10 to 18, your older children are developing independence and identity, making the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method particularly valuable during their emotional storms. Teaching them this technique directly gives them a portable self-regulation tool. With teens, the weather report becomes more sophisticated. I notice I'm feeling defensive right now and need a moment, modeling emotional vocabulary that respects their maturity while maintaining boundaries. Now that we've explored all 5 techniques, let's talk about how to implement them in your daily life with a simple 7-day challenge. Understanding these techniques is one thing, implementing them in the heat of the moment is another. That's why this 90-second challenge, a 7-day implementation plan designed to build these skills progressively. What makes this approach different is that we're not aiming for perfection. We're building awareness first, then action. As Aristotle wisely noted, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Here's your day-by-day plan. Days 1 to 2. Notice triggers without changing responses. Simply observe when you get triggered and what happens in your body. Don't try to change anything yet. Just build awareness. As Carl Jung reminds us, what you resist persists. What you observe transforms. Days 3 to 4. Practice techniques. 1 and 2. When triggered, apply the vagal brake breathing pattern and the curious observer stance. Focus on these two techniques exclusively. Days 5 to 6. Add techniques 3 and 4. Continue with the first two techniques and add the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method and the weather report when needed. Day 7. Implement technique 5. Create 3 specific if-then plans for your most common triggers. Let's talk about technique difficulty. If you're new to these approaches, you might find the vagal brake and the 5-4-3-2-1 method require more practice than others. That's completely normal. Think of these techniques as existing on a spectrum from simple to complex. The curious observer stance and weather report are cognitive shifts you can implement immediately, while the breathing patterns of the vagal brake might take a week of daily practice to feel natural. This is why our 7-day challenge introduces techniques gradually, allowing you to build competence with simpler approaches before adding more complex ones. I recommend starting with whichever technique feels most accessible to you. For many parents, the weather report offers the quickest win because it's straightforward, simply naming your emotional state and taking a brief pause. You can then gradually incorporate the physiological techniques as your confidence grows. Remember, imperfect application still brings benefits. Even getting halfway through the 5-4-3-2-1 method before stopping is still progress. I recommend tracking your triggers and responses in a simple journal. Note what triggered you, which technique you used, if any, and how it affected your response. This creates accountability and helps you see patterns over time. Remember, the goal is not to never feel triggered. That's impossible. The goal is to shorten the gap between trigger and recovery. As one father shared, "I still get triggered, but now it lasts minutes instead of hours." That's freedom. What's most powerful about this challenge is that it creates a virtuous cycle. As you respond more calmly, your child's behavior often improves, which means fewer triggers for you. It's a beautiful upward spiral of co-regulation. We've covered 5 powerful techniques that fit within the critical 90-second window when your child pushes your buttons. The vagal brake, a breathing pattern that activates your parasympathetic nervous system. The curious observer stance, a cognitive reframe that shifts you from reactive to responsive. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method, a sensory practice that pulls you into the present moment. The weather report, a strategic disengagement that models healthy emotional boundaries. The if-then plan, a preventative approach that prepares your brain for triggers. Remember that these techniques evolve as your child grows. What works during the toddler tantrums will transform into tools for navigating teenage emotional intensity. The beauty of these approaches is their scalability. The core principles remain consistent while the application adapts. For example, with younger children, your regulation is primarily about co-regulation. Your calm nervous system helps regulate their developing one. As developmental psychologist Dr. Tina Payne Bryson explains, you're lending them your prefrontal cortex until theirs is fully developed. With older children, these techniques become teaching opportunities. When your teenager sees you use the weather report during a heated discussion about screen time, you're not just regulating yourself, you're modeling skills they'll need in future relationships and workplaces. The most powerful moment comes when your child begins adopting these techniques themselves. One parent shared how her 6-year-old started saying, "I need to use my vagal brake during frustrating moments," evidence that these are not just parenting techniques, but life skills you're passing down. Remember, these techniques are not about suppressing emotions. They're about creating space between trigger and response. In that space lies your freedom to choose how you parent. As Viktor Frankl wisely observed, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. What's happening in your brain and body during those 90 seconds is not just about surviving a difficult parenting moment. It's about rewiring your brain's response patterns for the long term. You're literally creating new neural pathways each time you practice these techniques. I'd love to know which technique resonates most with you. Will you try the vagal break first? Or perhaps the curious observer stance speaks to you? Share in the comments which one you'll implement tomorrow. Next week, I'll show you how to teach these same regulation skills to your children, because ultimately, that's the goal. Not just to regulate ourselves, but to raise children who can regulate themselves. Until then, remember, the most powerful parenting tool you have is not perfect discipline strategies or clever consequences. It's your own regulated nervous system. Master those 90 seconds, and you master parenting itself. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more science-based parenting strategies. And if you know a parent who could use these techniques, sharing is the greatest gift you can give them and their children. Thank you for being the kind of parent who's committed to growth. Your children are fortunate to have you.